The air is thick with cigar smoke and the scent of expensive scotch. But underneath the luxury, there's the smell of desperation. Outside, the world is burning. It is July 1944. The Normandy landings happened less than a month ago. The bodies on Omaha Beach are barely cold. The Red Army is tearing through Belarus. London is being pulverized by V-1 flying bombs, but here in the secluded mountains of New Hampshire, at the Mount Washington Hotel, there is no blood. There is only ink. 730 delegates from 44 nations have gathered here. They are told they are here to build peace. They are told they are here to prevent another Great Depression. They are lying. They are not here to save the world. They are here to witness an execution. And the victim isn't a person. It is the sovereignty of every nation on earth except one. While soldiers fight for territory in Europe, a small group of men in this hotel are fighting for the soul of the future economy. They know a secret that the generals don't. He who controls the currency controls the peace. In room 307, a man is dying. John Maynard Keynes, the greatest economist in history, the intellectual giant of the British Empire, is suffering from heart failure. He is fighting to save Britain from financial slavery. Across the hall, his opponent is waiting. Harry Dexter White, an American bureaucrat, a man with thick glasses and a nervous demeanor. He looks like a boring accountant. But Harry Dexter White has a secret. He isn't just working for the United States Treasury. Codename Jurist. Harry Dexter White is a Soviet spy. And in the next 3 weeks, the spy will design the financial cage that you, I, and everyone watching this lives in today. To understand why 1944 matters, you have to understand the nightmare that preceded it. Imagine a neighborhood where every house is burning, and the neighbors are fighting over who owns the garden hose. That was the global economy in the 1930s. Before World War I, the world ran on the gold standard. This was a simple, brutal system. Money was gold. If you had a $20 bill, it was just a receipt for a specific amount of yellow metal sitting in a vault. It was honest. It was disciplined. And because of that, governments hated it. See, gold is a harsh mistress. You cannot print gold. If you want to spend more money on wars, on welfare, on palaces, you have to tax your citizens. And citizens hate taxes. So, when the Great Depression hit in 1929, nations panicked. They needed to stimulate their economies, but the gold standard was a straitjacket. It wouldn't let them move. So, one by one, they broke the glass. They abandoned gold. They started printing paper money out of thin air to pay their debts. This triggered a currency war. Let me explain this simply. Imagine you sell cars. Your neighbor also sells cars. To steal his customers, you lower your price. He lowers his price even more. You cut your price again until you are both selling cars at a loss. You both go bankrupt. Countries did this with their entire currencies. They intentionally made their money worthless to make their exports cheaper. It was a race to the bottom. It destroyed global trade. It starved millions. It paved the road for Adolf Hitler. By 1944, the leaders of the world knew one thing. We cannot go back to that chaos. They needed a referee. They needed a system. They needed stability. But stability is often just a polite word for control. The British Empire, led by the brilliant but ailing Keynes, arrived at Bretton Woods with a romantic idea. They wanted a partnership of equals. The United States arrived with a different plan. They held 80% of the world's gold reserves. Their factories were the only ones still standing. They didn't want a partnership. They wanted an empire. This moment right here, the shift from partnership to empire, is the pivot point of modern history. Most financial channels stop at the charts. We dig into the archives to find why the charts move. If you value deep dive documentaries that respect your intelligence and uncover the systems governing your life, make sure you are subscribed. Now, let's look at the weapon they used to build this empire. The battle at Bretton Woods wasn't fought with guns, it was fought with complex economic theories. But strip away the academic language and it was a poker game. Keynes knew the US was too powerful. He knew that if the world used the US dollar, America could hold every other nation hostage. So he proposed a revolutionary idea, the bankor. Think of the bankor like a casino chip. In a casino, you don't use real cash at the tables. You trade your cash for chips. The chips are just a tool to keep score. The casino doesn't own the chips in a way that gives them power over you. The chips are neutral. Keynes wanted a global neutral currency called the bankor to settle trades between nations. If Britain bought goods from France, they would pay in bankor. No country could print bankor. It would be managed by an international clearing union, a fair referee. It was a brilliant system designed to prevent any single country from becoming a dictator. It was fair. It was logical. Harry Dexter White looked at Keynes's plan, smiled, and threw it in the trash. White knew that the United States was about to be the only superpower left on Earth. Why would America agree to a neutral system when they held all the cards? White's plan was subtle. He used confusing jargon to hide a simple reality. He proposed that instead of a neutral bankor, the world should use gold. Wait, the delegates said. We just said gold was too rigid. There isn't enough of it. Correct, White replied. So we will use a proxy for gold, a currency that is as good as gold, a currency that is convertible to gold at a fixed rate anytime you want. Which currency? Asked the delegates. White didn't need to answer. There was only one currency left standing, the US dollar. Here's the trap. White proposed a system where every currency in the world, the French franc, the British pound, the German mark, would be pegged to the US dollar. And the US dollar, and only the US dollar, would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Do you see the brilliance? Before, every country orbited the gold sun directly. Now, the US inserted itself between the world and gold. To get to the ultimate value, gold, you had to go through the gatekeeper, the dollar. Keynes saw this immediately. He realized what this meant. It meant that if the United States sneezed, the rest of the world would catch pneumonia. It meant that the US could print dollars to buy up the world's assets, and the rest of the world would have to accept those dollars because they were as good as gold. Keynes fought back. He gave passionate speeches. He warned the delegates that they were signing a death warrant for their financial independence. He argued that this system would force the world to fund American wars and American debt forever. But Keynes was dying. He was pale, weak, often too sick to leave his room. Harry Dexter White was relentless. He controlled the schedule. He controlled the minutes of the meetings. He bullied the smaller nations. He used the promise of post-war loans as leverage. You want money to rebuild your bombed cities? You vote for the dollar. It was extortion dressed up as diplomacy. But here is where the story turns into a noir thriller. Why was Harry Dexter White so aggressive? Why did he want to destroy the British Empire's financial power so badly? History tells us he was an American patriot securing dominance for the USA. The archives tell us something darker. Harry Dexter White was providing confidential documents to Soviet intelligence. His handlers in Moscow wanted to see the British Empire destroyed. They viewed Britain as the old imperialist enemy. They believed that if the US and Britain were rivals, the Soviet Union would be safer. White's aggression wasn't just American arrogance, it was, in part, a geopolitical hit job. He was dismantling the old European order. He succeeded. On July 22, 1944, the delegates signed the Bretton Woods Agreement. Keynes, defeated and exhausted, signed it too. He died 2 years later, his heart finally giving out. He died knowing he had failed to stop the inevitable. The mechanism of control was now active. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, created to be the emergency doctor for economies. But the US held the veto power. If you wanted the doctor's help, you had to follow American rules. The World Bank, created to rebuild Europe. But it funded projects that opened markets to American corporations. The dollar standard, the entire global trade system was now denominated in US dollars. If you were Brazil and you wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you needed US dollars. If you were France and you wanted to buy steel from Germany, you needed US dollars. This created an artificial, insatiable demand for American paper. The US could print paper, ship it abroad, and get real cars, real oil, and real coffee in return. It was the greatest magic trick in financial history. The French finance minister later called it an exorbitant privilege. But every privilege comes with a price. Harry Dexter White thought he had built a fortress. He thought pegging the dollar to gold would keep the US honest. He thought the 35-ounce promise was unbreakable. He was wrong. He built a ticking time bomb. By linking the dollar to gold, he created a promise that the US could only keep if it didn't print too much money. But what happens when a superpower wants to go to war in Vietnam? What happens when a superpower wants to build a great society? They print. And when they print more claims on gold than there is actual gold in the vault, the lie begins to crack. The delegates at Bretton Woods clinked their champagne glasses. They thought they had solved the problem of money. They didn't solve it. They just deferred the crisis. They planted the seeds for 1971. For 25 years, it seemed like Harry Dexter White was a genius. The system worked. The world rebuilt. Germany rose from the ashes. Japan became a manufacturing giant. The American middle class became the envy of the world. Economists call this the golden age of capitalism. I call it the incubation period of the virus. Because underneath the chrome and the neon, a fatal contradiction was rotting the system from the inside out. It was a mathematical paradox known as the Triffin dilemma, and you don't need a PhD to understand it. You just need to understand a Ponzi scheme. Here is the flaw in the Bretton Woods design. To be the world reserve currency, the United States had to flood the world with dollars. Europe needed dollars to rebuild. Asia needed dollars to trade. So the US ran massive trade deficits. They bought stuff from the world and sent paper dollars out. Billions of dollars left the US. But remember the promise? Every single one of those dollars was a claim check for gold at $35 an ounce. As long as everyone trusted the US, the system held. It's like a bank. As long as everyone leaves their money in the account, the bank is fine. But the US was printing more claim checks than they had gold in the vault. By the 1960s, the paper dollar pile was a mountain. The gold pile was a molehill. The smart money started to notice. France has always been the rebellious teenager of the Western Alliance. And in 1965, President Charles de Gaulle decided to call America's bluff. He looked at the numbers. He saw the US spending money on the Vietnam War like a drunken sailor. He saw Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society welfare programs. And he realized they don't have the gold. De Gaulle gave a press conference. It is one of the most important moments in financial history. He basically said, "The dollar is a lie. We don't want your paper anymore. We want the metal." And then he did the unthinkable. He sent the French Navy to New York Harbor, ships loaded with pallets of US paper dollars docked in New York, and demanded the Federal Reserve exchange them for bars of solid gold. It was a run on the bank, a geopolitical raid. Other countries saw this and panicked. Spain, Switzerland, Germany, they all started rushing to the window. "Give us our gold." The US gold reserves began to bleed. The vaults at Fort Knox were emptying at an alarming rate. The US was hemorrhaging power. They had two choices. The first was the honest choice. Stop printing money. Raise interest rates. Crash the US economy to save the dollar's value. Political suicide. The second was the dishonest choice. Change the rules of the game. Guess which one they picked? It is a Sunday evening. Millions of Americans are sitting in front of their televisions, waiting to watch the popular Western show, Bonanza. Suddenly, the screen cuts to the White House. President Richard Nixon sits at the resolute desk. He looks sweaty, shifty. He looks into the camera and delivers the speech that changed your life forever. He says, "I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets." Temporarily. That was the lie of the century. It has been over 50 years. That temporary window never opened again. In that moment, Nixon didn't just break the Bretton Woods Agreement. He didn't just break a treaty. He broke the definition of money itself. Before 1971, a dollar was a receipt for gold. It had intrinsic value because it represented something physical. After 1971, a dollar is nothing. It is a piece of paper or a number on a screen. So, what backs it now? If you ask an economist, they will say the full faith and credit of the United States. If you ask a realist, they will tell you the truth. Men with guns. The dollar is now backed by the US military and the demand for oil. The petrodollar system, which we will cover in another investigation. But the immediate effect was chaos. The anchor was cut. The ship was adrift. In the 1970s, without gold to restrain it, the US government went on a printing spree. Inflation exploded. Oil prices quadrupled. The stock market crashed. In real terms, they called it stagflation. But it was really just the market realizing that the money was fake. Now, look at your screen. Look at your life. Why does this history lesson matter to you right now in 2025? Because the crime of 1971 is still being committed against you every single day. Before 1971, if you worked harder and produced more, you got paid more. The money was sound. After 1971, you worked harder, you produced more technology, more goods, more value, but your wages stayed the same. Where did the extra money go? It went to the people who own the assets. It went to the banks. It went to the government. This is the Cantillon effect. Imagine pouring honey onto a saucer. The honey forms a mound in the middle before it spreads to the edges. The people in the middle, the government, Wall Street, get the honey, new money first. They buy stocks, houses, and assets while prices are still low. By the time the money spreads out to the edge of the saucer, prices have already risen. You're getting the leftovers of the currency. This explains everything you hate about the modern economy. Why houses are unaffordable. It's not that houses are becoming better. A 1950s house is just wood and brick. It's that the money you're using to buy the house is becoming worthless. You're trying to measure a solid object with a ruler that keeps shrinking. In 1930, a house cost 3 times the average salary. Today, in major cities, it costs 10 times, 15 times, or even 20 times more. That is the premium you pay for a fiat currency system. Why? You have no savings. In a gold standard, saving money makes sense. The money holds value. In a fiat system, post-1971, saving is punished. Inflation eats your savings like a termite colony. So, you are forced to speculate. You are forced to buy stocks, crypto, or real estate just to stay alive. The system turned you into a gambler against your will. The debt trap. Since money can be printed for free, debt became cheap. Governments borrowed trillions. Corporations borrowed trillions. You borrowed to go to college. We built a world on debt because we thought the bill would never come due. Harry Dexter White's system in 1944 put the dollar on the throne. Nixon's decision in 1971 removed the crown but kept the sword. They built a system where the United States can export its inflation to the rest of the world. When the US prints money, the price of bread in Egypt goes up. The price of fuel in France goes up. It is a form of financial imperialism so subtle that most victims don't even know who is robbing them. But delusions don't last forever. Gravity always wins. And right now, the system built in 1944 and patched in 1971 is starting to shake. The debt is too high. The printing is too fast. The world is starting to look for an exit again, just like de Gaulle did in 1965. They call it de-dollarization. I call it the return to reality. The camera moves through the empty halls of the Mount Washington Hotel today. It's quiet. The ghosts of Keynes and White are long gone. But the echoes of their argument are louder than ever. We are living in the final act of the play written in 1944. Harry Dexter White's victory was absolute, but it was temporary. He died of a heart attack just 4 years after the conference, shortly after being accused of being a Soviet spy. He never saw the long-term consequences of his creation. Keynes died knowing he was right. He warned that if the global system relied on the deficit spending of a single nation, it would eventually collapse under the weight of its own debt. Look at the debt clock today. 34 trillion. 35 trillion. It spins so fast it's just a blur. This is not finance. This is a mathematical impossibility. We are back where we started. Just like in the 1930s, the neighbors are fighting again. Russia, China, and the global south are buying gold at record speeds. They are building their own payment systems. They are tired of the exorbitant privilege. They are preparing for the day the music stops. So, what have we learned? We learned that money is not a force of nature like gravity. It is a fiction. It is a story written by men in smoke-filled rooms. In 1944, they wrote a story about gold and dollars. In 1971, they rewrote the story to be just about dollars. And soon, they will try to write a new story. Maybe it will be CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Maybe it will be a return to a basket of commodities. But the lesson for you is this. Do not trust the storytellers. The system designed at Bretton Woods was not built for your benefit. It was built to transfer wealth from the productive many to the connected few. It is a prison without walls. You don't see the bars, you just feel the inflation. You don't see the guards, you just see the tax man. You are working harder than your grandfather, but you own less. That isn't an accident. That is the design. The dollar is still king, yes, but it is an old king, a sick king. The castle is crumbling. The moat is dry. You cannot change the macroeconomy. You cannot stop the Federal Reserve from printing. You cannot stop the geopolitical shifts, but you can stop being a victim. You can learn the history. You can understand that holding cash is like holding a melting ice cube. You can look for assets that cannot be printed. You can step out of the illusion. History is a circle. We are approaching the part of the circle where the system resets. It will be scary. It will be chaotic. But for those who know what is coming, it will be the greatest opportunity of a lifetime. Click the button. Subscribe to the money system. Turn on notifications. The algorithm hides these truths. You have to choose to see them.